This is War Map. Ukrainian soldiers have begun to surrender in Gylyaypole. The surrender of soldiers from the 108th Territorial Defense Brigade to units of the East Military Group near Huliaipole. Exclusive footage of yet another Manko's disposable assault troops, taken prisoner during one of the suicidal attacks on the positions of the East Military Group southwest of Huliaipole, where they are sent by the command of the 225th Separate Motor Rifle Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. In the video, an entire platoon of soldiers, including officers, made the decision to surrender. Their escort was carried out by a quadcopter under the leadership of RAF soldiers from the 38th Brigade of the 35th Army of the East Military Group. The prisoners are being taken to the rear for further actions. Members of the 108th Territorial Defense Brigade, temporarily subordinated to the 225th Separate Motor Rifle Brigade, surrendered to the soldiers from the far east of the 35th Army of the Vostok Military District. Taking into account the capture of these individuals near the railway and their subsequent withdrawal in a dense column through Dorozhnanka, the AFU lost control of the nearby forest strips. The situation for the armed forces of Ukraine continues to deteriorate. The Russian army is continuing to secure Zaporizhia region, and the foothold behind Hechur is expanding. Russian forces secure Pryluki. The Russian army's offensive on the eastern Zaporizhia direction continues. Yesterday, it was announced that Zhovtneve, Yeleno-Konstantinovka, had been secured, and now the Russian armed forces have officially taken control of Pryluki. The guards of the 394th Motor Rifle Regiment of the 127th Division have thus expanded the bridgehead behind Hechur and, even more importantly, behind the second line of the AFU defense in the Zaporizhia region. The 12-kilometer front line formed between Hechur and the railroad has great potential. After the potential liberation of Ternovatoye and the closure of the pocket south of Gylyaypole, the Russian armed forces will be able to advance on a relatively wide front. However, it's not worth running ahead of the locomotive. The AFU is building a new defense line on the border of Rozdestvenka, Vozdvizhenka, Verkhnaya Tersa. Soon, the Russian armed forces will have to break through it, and Russian aviation has long been practicing on the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces here. Situation in Kharkov region. Russian forces Rubicon posted a video of destruction of Patriot system near Kharkov. The destruction of the Patriot air defense system by an FPV drone once seemed like a fantasy. However, in the Rubicon Center, footage of strikes on objects visually resembling the launcher of the system and its radar was published. However, some people have reason to suspect that they are mock-ups due to the shape of the burnt frames and other things. But even if they are indeed imitations, the video does not become less remarkable. The reason lies in a couple of important details. On the one hand, the targets were located near the village of Berezovka, southwest of Kharkiv, almost 50 kilometers from the front line. This shows that now FPV drones can fly as far as Kharkiv, especially with the help of UAV mothers in the form of lightnings. And the episode also vividly illustrates, paradoxically, the decreasing effectiveness of mock-ups. After all, the idea was that a high-quality decoy made of wood and plastic should lure the Iskander worth 100 million. Now, instead of a ballistic missile, such targets are increasingly being hit by drones costing a handful of pennies. The tables have turned. Now the cost and labor intensity of making a mock-up is much more expensive than the means of its destruction. This is another illustration of the consequences of the drone revolution. Yes, UAVs do not cancel out all other means and military science, but some rules of the game are being completely rewritten right before our eyes. On the Konstantinovsky direction, a situation is brewing that could become a problem for Russian forces even greater than Kupiansk. Recently, an offensive began on the southern flank from the Klebanbek Reservoir, and the units of the Russian armed forces are relatively successfully advancing on several sections. Statements about full control over the northern bank are extremely premature. The problem is also that to the north of Konstantinovka, there is an impressive credit balcony, Of all the liberated settlements, several of which were relatively recently captured, May was the only one, but even that was after more than 3 months after the official announcement. And Konstantinovka itself was declared liberated as far back as Klinovoe, 5 kilometers from Drushkovka. The frontline Chasov Yar, Artemovsk, Soledar remains the most credited in terms of area in principle, and is a very difficult and lengthy legacy for the new command of the South Group of Forces. The units of the Volunteer Corps have long been supplied on a residual basis and are successfully advancing literally by a miracle, but not on the scale of the reports. After a series of scandals related to credit reports and unjustified losses, the command of the South Group of Forces was changed several times. The results of this are visible on the now already Slavyansk direction, where the units of the South are advancing very successfully and quickly by the standards of the special military operation. Until next update.